Well, I suppose just the sort of funny things. When I first joined, we weren't allowed to wear trousers apart from when we were actually on nights. And the trousers were male trousers, so they didn't even fit properly. They were horrible. And then we had these horrible sort of anoraks, great big long anoraks, so we weren't allowed to have a proper, short anorak until we were in cars. And we had to wait until you were allowed to go into a car before you were given a proper anorak. And then our truncheons were probably that size, so we didn't have battens or, CS spray, and it was very sort of, I suppose, very old-fashioned when we look back now. And we had handbags, had great big handbags to carry everything in.
A lot of people would be amazed that we, as women, when we first joined, you had a handbag about so big that a 6-inch truncheon would fit across the bottom of it, and it was no use to man the beast. And we were issued with capes. I've still got my cape. I should have brought it in for you, but I didn't. And to go off to training school for 12 weeks and then do different courses. And we had monthly exams that we had to do as probationers to get through. And a lot of people took their sergeant's exams once they got through that first 2 years because the knowledge was still fresh. Would you believe stories?
Is your truncheon in the museum?
No, my handbag is. Yeah, my handbag, and I think my old police bowler from traffic is probably there as well.
I think the biggest obstacle for me was the uniform, because it just wasn't designed for being operational, being out and about. I couldn't drive, so I used a push bike. And I was on this push bike with a pencil skirt. And I can remember I was on patrol. I had to go to a football match. And this was Reading. It was back in Elm Road. And for some reason, I had to get over a barrier. There was some trouble in the stands, I think. And the only way I could climb this barrier was to hoik the skirt up. So, it was sort of at bottom level. And of course, the crowd thought that was fantastic. But it was the only way I could get over the barrier. So there's me with next week's washing on display, trying to get over this barrier. So it wasn't practical.
So yes, I was on traffic for a couple of years, and I'd established myself as a Class 1 advanced driver with a Home Office ticket from there, and second in my class for the law course. And also that was the time when we had lots of cars being stolen and chases around Black Bedleys, and I'd proven myself in that arena as well. And it came up to Christmas, and I worked with one crewmate most of the time, and on the opposite car were 2 other chaps, and we got on really very well. And at Christmas they gave me this package, a present, and they said that they'd been working with me for some time, and they realised I had something missing, and they were hoping that this would help towards it. And when I unwrapped it, they made me unwrap it then, and when they unwrapped it, it was a chocolate willy. And I thought to myself, right, what do I do here? So I just bit it, and that was it. And I think that was it. There was a bit more respect there in terms of that.
Okay, practical joking can be really positive because it's fun, so long as somebody's not the butt of it, the whole time. And there was a really classic practical joke that I did when I was at Wokingham. In fact, I didn't even realise it was going on to begin with. There was a very young female officer, and she was very wide-eyed and naive. And it was about the time that Nightmare on Elm Street was one of the horror movies on, etc. And there was a call to a suspicious noise in a churchyard. So when not a lot's happening in the middle of the night, you go and back up your colleagues. And so myself and my crewmate went to back up, and her tutor constable, because she was still being tutored, looked at us and said, no, we're fine, we've got this, you go off and do something else. At which point me and the officer I was with thought, they're up to something, they're obviously going to do something to tease this officer. So we thought, right, okay, if the other member of the team are doing something to tease her, they'll have parked down in the railway station car park, which is pitch black. So we went down to the railway station car park and found their car. What they were actually doing was they had a sheet over 2 of them, and they were down some boiler steps, and they had a torch underneath the sheet, and basically the tutor constable asked her to go one way and he went the other, like you always do, just to check the external perimeter of a property. And he finally got her to go in the opposite direction, and these two barely moved. I think they basically just sort of like shuffled a bit on the step, and she was off and running. It's a ghost, it's a ghost. And she was, you know, had to be caught stampeding about half a mile away. Meanwhile, we thought they were being mean to this young lady, so we found their car. Now the car was locked, but they'd left the boot open. So I took off, we had Ganex Max then, which sort of like creaked and squeaked. So I took that off, and I basically went over the boot, went through the boot, and was lying behind their two seats as these two came down from the churchyard to get back in the car. And they were having a word. Did you see him? I can't. Oh, it's a ghost. It's a ghost. And you know, rerunning it and laughing, chortling massively. So they get in the car and they shut the car. And I'd like to point out that it was completely safe because there was a car park, absolutely nothing else in it, nothing to hit. So I let them start to reverse, and then I sprung up and went, "Freddie!" and put my fingers in both their shoulders. At which point they screamed their heads off, absolutely screamed. And my colleague who was up observing it, he said basically the car screeched to a halt, both doors came open and the lights went, and all he saw, and they were both trying to drag me out of opposite sides of the car. I was almost about 6 inches longer in the arms by the time they'd calmed down. And for the next few days they were going on about how they'd tricked Vicky, and then I'd creep up behind them and say, "Tell them the next bit,